Maybe it look terrifying. Now it's got
It's supposed to look terrifying. It's ghost hunting.
If you are a lover of all things dark, spooky, haunted history, you have found the right place. I'm Taylor. Let's go fright seeing. Hello and welcome to episode 2 of my new series, Let's Go Fright Seeing. If you are new here or if you've never watched this series before, 90% of the time on this channel I talk true crime, but once in a while I like to sprinkle in some spooky, dark history to break things up because that's another topic that I love talking about. So Let's Go Fright Seeing is where I take you with me on my traveling adventures, and one of my favorite ways to get to know a new place is to go on tours and learn these spooky, dark history things that make places so interesting. So that's what this series is. You can find all of the episodes of Let's Go Fright Seeing on my YouTube channel, and there will also be a playlist linked with all of them, so you can watch all of the ones that are out. Right now there's only 2, but if you're watching this in the future, hopefully there's like a lot of them. Today we are going down underneath the city of Portland into the terrifying tales from the Shanghai tunnels to talk all things dark history, hauntings, and spooky things in between. And then in next week's episode, I'm going to go over some above ground haunts that I explored in Portland because there was so much that happened in Portland that it needs 2 separate videos. I caught some pretty spooky things that I'm kind of excited about, and also there's just a lot of really interesting stories and facts to tell about Portland. I loved it there. It was my first time in Portland. I had an absolute blast. It was the second stop on our Pacific Northwest road trip. We went and did as many spooky things as we could, and we took our ghost hunting equipment, aka this electromagnetic field reader. EMFs are used to detect electricity, but they're also a popular tool for the amateur ghost hunter like myself because they allegedly can pick up otherworldly, spirit, spooky things. When we stayed at the Heceta Head Lighthouse, which I talked about in the last episode, we didn't experience anything spooky or even very interesting with the EMF reader. But on this trip in Portland, things happened. And Zach and I are both very skeptical. We are both believers in the paranormal, but not every experience is a paranormal one. You know what I mean? So we tried our best to come up with reasons why the EMF would be going off in certain places. But there are a couple of times that I just kind of can't explain. Anyways, and last thing before we jump in, none of the companies, tours, restaurants, or hotels I mention in this series, at least this season, maybe someday. But so far nothing is sponsored. Everything that I mention, all the things that we go and... But so far nothing is sponsored. And all the things that I mention in this season are all things that we just found on our own and went and did and loved. And you can also find a full breakdown of where we stayed, things we ate, what to do, and a little travel guide on my website. I will have that linked in the description. You can always find those on tgicrimeday.com. All right, all the housekeeping things are out of the way. Let's get spooky in Portland. One of the other things that I wanted to mention that we did because it was the perfect way to start our spooky evening was a trip to Ravens Manor. If you are in Portland and you have never been, or if you have been to Portland and you have been here, you guys, you have to go. We had the most fun time at this bar. So the bar looks like a mad scientist lab. Everything is like spooky. It's all dark and haunted in there. And there is everything that you could imagine. Zach got a Hellfire, which is the Ravens Manor version of a smoked old fashioned with some magical twists. And I did the Mad Scientist, which is a whole potion making experience. The drinks were phenomenal. The bartenders were lovely. We had a blast. So huge shout out to Ravens Manor. It's like the most fun thing. They even have an experience that you can do. We didn't have time to do it, but they call it the Dr. Ravens Elixir experience, where you get to do like a mixology moment with a bartender. You have to go. It's so fun. It's so spooky. The perfect way to start or end a little night of hauntings. So like I said, we had to run from Ravens Manor to the first tour of the evening, the Haunted Shanghai Tunnel Tour and Beer Tasting hosted by Old Town Pizza and Brewing. Another fabulous, seriously, you have to go there if you're ever in Portland. Our tour guide, Natasha, was an absolute icon and made this tour so fun. She was a fantastic storyteller and she gave us all the best spooky details. So in the basement of Old Town Pizza and Brewing is an entrance to the tunnels under Portland. Are you doing it?
Yep.
Let's go fright seeing underground in Portland. Did you know that there was a system of tunnels in the middle of Portland? Because I didn't. And I found out that there are groups of passages. Most of them aren't connected to each other anymore, but when they were built, the Portland Underground stretched throughout Old Town Chinatown and down toward the riverfront of the Willamette River. The Portland Underground tunnels have been nicknamed the Shanghai Tunnels, and if you've ever heard the term shanghaied in reference to someone being kidnapped, this is where that term comes from, allegedly. And also, really quick, since we're talking about it, the term shanghaied, not great, not politically correct. That's what these tunnels are called and nicknamed, so that's why we were calling it that. But just so you know, just one of those things to learn and be aware of, that shanghaied is not the most appropriate term to use. And there's some debate on how true the stories of the Shanghai tunnels are, but whether the stories are a horrifying legend or a true horrific nightmare, the story goes that these tunnels were originally built under the city for a legitimate purpose, such as easily transporting goods to and from the docks, keeping things safe from the weather, and for easy deliveries into the shops and saloons, etc. But if history has taught us anything, it is that if you build a tunnel, there will be trouble. What's it called when something almost rhymes? I wish that rolled off the tongue a little better. Anyways, from about 1850 to 1941, Portland was considered to be one of the most dangerous, out-of-control cities in the US. It was very, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, if you will. So these tunnels quickly became a place for all sorts of shady dealings, i.e. opium dens, bootleggers, and the whole bathtub gin situation. Interesting fact, Portland actually took a dive into Prohibition in 1914, which was 5 years before the US government made it a nationwide movement. But of course, if you don't allow space for the legal sale of alcohol, you leave space for the illegal sale of alcohol. And that's where that bathtub gin and very questionable moonshine comes in. Allegedly, during this time, ship captains would head into a tavern and watch for some strapping young gentleman to drink himself into a stupor, or the captain might help things along by slipping something into the man's drink, or just straight up knock him in the head, knock him out. The story goes that the captain and some of his cronies would then position this man at a certain spot in the tavern while everyone is drinking and yelling and carrying on. Someone below would pull a trapdoor open, and that unfortunate man would fall into the tunnels below. The captains would pay $50 a head to these men who captured these unwilling workers. So ships would travel for months across the Pacific Ocean to deliver goods to Shanghai. That's why it's nicknamed Shanghaiing. And these ships' journeys were very brutal. People would always get sick. They almost always ran out of food rations. So it wasn't a desired job by any means, which is why they would supposedly steal people, force them into crew positions, and then there you were. Basically, if you grabbed a drunk man, knocked him out, and then he woke up on a ship, he's already there with nowhere to run, so it's either work or starve. And like I said, this could all just be urban legend, or there could be some truth to it. There's probably somewhere in between where this story actually falls, but it is worth noting that there is not a direct tunnel to the waterfront, and it's not 100% confirmed that these kidnappings actually happened, but given what we know about the human race, would this be that difficult to believe? Unfortunately, I don't think so. I think it's a very believable thing, because humans are the worst. Either way, these tunnels are something else. They are so spooky. As you step through the door to this steep and narrow staircase, the hustle and bustle of Old Town Pizza suddenly disappears. You know when you leave a loud room and then the silence almost feels kind of like thick in your ears? That is what I experienced as I stepped back in time into the Portland Underground. The ceiling is really low in certain places. There are pipes you could easily miss and smack your head on if you aren't paying attention, and the air had that dusty smell from the unfinished floors. Our guide handed out lanterns and flashlights. We fired up the good old EMF reader and stepped into the dark. Is this safe? As we went on our journey, our lovely tour guide told us the tales of the paranormal happenings in the tunnels. If you watched the last episode of Let's Go Frightseeing when we stayed at the Heceta Head Lighthouse, you saw that we took the EMF reader around, and it didn't do anything strange. It barely even picked up when there was actual electricity around. However, in the Portland Underground, like I mentioned at the start of this video, it was going bananas. It didn't do anything weird before Portland, and it didn't do anything weird after Portland. But when we were in those tunnels down below the city, there were a couple of spots where I was able to figure out that there was a pipe that most likely had electrical wires or things like that to explain it. But there was one specific spot on this tour that I could not come up with an explanation for. So as we were walking through the tunnels, there was this little side tunnel off of the main part where they had these cells where they would supposedly lock people in them as prisoners. The tunnels weren't very big, they weren't very tall. Here's a picture of my husband Zach for reference in the cell so you can kind of get an idea of how big this space was. I was actually the last person to circle into and then leave that area. And while I was standing in that area, the light on the EMF reader went up to this little second green light, which isn't a lot, but usually it just stays on that first green light. Like if it's turned on, it doesn't normally jump up unless there's kind of a lot of electricity next to it. So as I was standing there, it jumped up to that second green, and I just thought I would just see. And I quietly said out loud, "Is someone there?" And it jumped up to the second light, so that's when I started filming. Then when everyone else had stepped ahead of me, it popped up to the yellow, and this video is obviously very dark. It's a dark, spooky tunnel, obviously, but you can see what you need to see, and that is the lights on the EMF.
Been torn out and covered with concrete on top. But on the other side there, we are still looking for the
Crawling under.
blueprints to tell us exactly what it was. Kinda looks like a small fireplace and chimney. They were a mess.
Is someone
Like
there?
tripping and human trafficking going on. I am full. They do not have any connecting tunnels, so they could not be associated with any of the
Is someone there? Can you hear me? Oh my gosh, okay. I want to go. Okay, goodbye. Thank you. Goodbye. Obviously, I panicked because I was alone, maybe talking to a ghost, and that was the first time I've ever seen the EMF reader do anything other than exactly this. It usually just sits there on the green.
The shoots over across the Columbia and down to the Atlantic Plus here. There's another part where I can show you the brickwork.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because it goes, yeah. I do too. No, dude, yeah,
Nerd. Oh my god, sorry.
Are you guys familiar with
It's not doing anything in here. Oh, it's doing something
It's
near
like
that.
I described
But it
it
has
as
to
But
be,
that's
like,
because
right
it's
the
on it.
haunted mansion, Disney,
Oh.
kitschy.
Is something
cocktail
there?
bar. It's super cute, but it's kitschy.
Is
as hell.
someone there?
And the building is from 1883. So
Are
they have
you-
this thing called the
Is someone
where it's like little
is someone down here?
And it's downstairs. So by
Is there
virtue
someone
of you
there?
being downstairs in a building from 1883,
Are you stuck
you are
here?
in the Portland Underground. And because I'm in the service entertainment industry, I rub elbows with a lot of people. One of the employees took me down.
It
It's
definitely
mostly us,
flashed.
these renovated office spaces, trash rooms, not super interesting. But also, I like bricks. And so, for whatever reason, especially I'm a very tactile person, so I just like
Don't touch
ran
it.
my hand across all.
Oh,
I'm glad someone else.
it's never
understood.
done that before. Okay.
All right, we're gonna go and.
Is someone there? I want to know what you think. Like I said, not every single thing is paranormal, but some things definitely are. The next spot that is supposed to be very haunted is this stairwell that leads up to the street level. This was the second spot where the EMF reader started going nuts. I stepped in there and my EMF started lighting up and going into the yellow zone, which I hadn't seen it do outside of this specific tour before then.
Possibly, yeah.
Because the tunnels were still getting a lot
Hello?
of similar use as they were an even more recent memory. It wasn't until the early 90s,
Is someone
late
there?
80s, early 90s, that they started being.
See, that's where I
closed
can't-
off.
I'm like, that
Because
doesn't make sense to
people
me.
had kind of forgotten
'Cause
about
I go
the
this way?
tunnels.
Oh, when it-
Actually,
when it-
until Michael P. Jones' original tour.
That's what I don't understand. Like what?
Basically,
Right there.
like, if
Only
you know
right
about
there.
the tunnels, it's because we're
Not
using
there?
the tunnels. If you didn't know about the tunnels, it
Only
was
there.
safer that you
Hello?
didn't. Because it was mostly run by a lot of
Is something
squatters,
there?
also your dealers, your addicts, your party kids, people that don't want to get caught. Like my friend on the other side told me a story about
Can
how
you
he ran
touch
into
the
a drug deal gone wrong once.
Top of this?
One time he ended up just walking down 7-some blocks and ended up under a speakeasy. But you can't do that anymore.
Is it one of these?
I don't
Okay,
see how
that could be
tunnels
that.
are
Okay,
filmed or
yes.
not,
That
and
makes
because
sense.
What the tunnels did was connect
Oh, that's
the building.
I don't
Right up, like,
understand.
like, if you
This
have
is
a
very-
building that has a basement,
Hello.
this is the haunted
Okay,
ground.
goodbye.
This doesn't have
Please don't follow us
the
home. You're doing
wireless
great.
connection
I love your home.
anymore. It also means you would end up underneath somebody else's business. And you might
I don't
accidentally
understand.
break them off.
And like I said in that clip, I was right next to that electrical box, so that totally made sense that it was lighting up. As I got closer to that brick wall and the middle of the stairs, like farther away from the electrical box, it was still like popping up and doing things. That one was not as convincing to me. It was a little strange. What do you think? Was it a ghost? Yes or no? The first one where I was in that area by myself, that was a lot more strange and unexplainable than that second one when I was in that little area by the electrical box, but it was weird. It was weird and there was a vibe, okay? After that little experience, we went back up to where the living people were and went through this courtyard on our way to the other side of the underground. The story about the ghost in the courtyard is one of the most well-known ghosts in Portland from what I understand. This ghost is named Nina, and she haunts Old Town Pizza. Old Town Pizza used to be the Merchant Hotel, which was a luxury hotel for the time. This hotel took 4 years to build and was completed in 1884, so it's been there a long time. It was very fancy because it had one of the very first hydraulic elevators in the whole city. Brag, brag, brag. The Merchant operated as a hotel until 1967, and then it was named an official historic landmark in 1977 and is one of the few remaining buildings that is in that Victorian Italianate cast iron style on the West Coast. They have a lot of that in Portland. She's an absolutely gorgeous building. So this building has been around a long time and has seen a lot. Remember the whole prohibition, sex, drugs, rock and roll I mentioned earlier? The legend goes that Nina was a sex worker who frequented the Merchant when it was in use as a hotel. Nina had a young daughter and had been coerced into sex work and had no way to escape. She was worried for her daughter's safety and worried what her captors would do if she tried to run. One day Nina met some quote-unquote missionaries, but I feel like maybe they were cops. But that's just me because they offered to help Nina if she could help them to get the scoop on her captors. If they were actually there doing like the Lord's work, wouldn't they just help her? That's why I think they were maybe undercover somehow. Anyways, Nina trusted these men and she told them everything she knew about the shady dealings happening at the Merchant. Unfortunately, it appeared that her captors had figured out that she had snitched and she was allegedly thrown down the elevator shaft. People have reported seeing a woman in a black dress wandering near the elevator, and her presence is often felt in the back room of Old Town Pizza, specifically in a section that shares a brick wall with that elevator. Supposedly, Nina's name is carved into a brick that's in the elevator shaft, and she has been seen floating through the restaurant from time to time. Also, while we were in the underground tunnels, Natasha, our tour guide, told us that there is a delivery person who will no longer do deliveries at that location because he has experienced such weird things in that area of the restaurant. So maybe it is Nina playing some tricks, which she deserves to do. So past that courtyard and the beautiful haunted elevator, we went down this little tiny narrow staircase to another set of tunnels. During these tours, sometimes the guides find pieces of glass, porcelain, bones, and things like that, and they keep them in these little buckets to have them looked at by historians because they are little pieces of history and super interesting, no matter how big or small they are. Our tour group was the coolest. We actually ended up meeting 2 archaeologists who were so freaking fun, and they looked at some of the things the tour group has found, so here's a little bit of that fun interaction. We had a blast. Also, seriously, if you're ever in a new city and maybe you're a little bit of an introvert, the best way to meet the coolest people is to go on a haunted tour.
So you can look at the different types of lip, and then you can get some clues based on the body of it. If you see a seam, you're looking at something that's more modern. You got some bone? Hey, where's our bone specialist?
You have a bone specialist?
We do. So we have.
Oh yeah, shit, come over here.
Where's my anthropologist? Katie. I need to look at this.
So I figured that one's chicken. There was one.
Paging Katie, the anthropologist.
I know, yeah. If you would please come to the room.
An archaeological emergency.
Yeah, it is. Oh my gosh. Tell me what type of bone this is. So she thinks it's chicken. That's a vertebrae, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So there's that one. Like this one definitely just like looks like a chicken bone or something similar, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, or a metatarsal.
Guys, we jackpotted
No, this is
on
chicken.
Vertebrae that I was trying to figure out.
This one, okay. This
And literally only because you guys are also archaeologists.
yeah, that's, I mean, I had a tetanus
like-
shot last week, so.
Just
Sorry, my life right there. So these were all like in a little trash
Just
bin.
in this area.
So you would have also could have hit. It's called a midden. So essentially trash pits.
Yeah.
So we used to love like throwing trash right outside our windows.
Yep.
So we had terrible like diseases and stuff.
Shout out to Allie and Katie, who were the bomb, and taught us some cool history things. We went and got pizza with them after, and I just got to nerd out and ask them questions about bones and crime scenes and things like that. So in that side of the tunnels, it wasn't a very big area. I took the EMF reader around, but I didn't get anything but the one green light, which makes me feel like I for sure had a weird thing happen in the first section of tunnels. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Do you think? Spooky? Not spooky? Haunted? Not haunted?
Oh gosh, a man.
As part of this tour with Old Town Pizza, you get to do a little beer tasting of the Old Town Pizza beers. I myself went for a hard seltzer because I'm that kind of a girly, but Zach said that the beers were all great. So if you are a beer lover, or even if you're not, go on this tour anyways, and then get a pizza after because this pizza was like 10 out of 10. I still think about it It was that kind of pizza that is so delicious, it looks like a cartoon. Do you know what I mean? Anyways, I highly recommend this tour. It was awesome. The tour guide was great. And then the whole atmosphere of Old Town Pizza is just perfection. We had the best time. To finish up this episode of Let's Go Frightseeing, I'm going to play a clip of our tour guide, Natasha, who was kind enough to let me film her talking about her own spookiest experience. She does these tours all the time. She's very comfortable in those tunnels. She knows them like the back of her hand, and she can usually explain away anything strange that happens. So she's comfortable. She doesn't scare easily, but I asked her if she ever did have an experience that made her think twice about how haunted it was down there, and she was kind enough to tell us that story. And before I play that clip, don't forget to subscribe so you can see the next episode of Let's Go Frightseeing. The next one coming up is going to be the spookiness above ground in Portland. Also, send me your ghost stories and your hauntings so that I can share them in a future episode. I would really love to put together an episode of listener stories, so you can email those to tgicrimeday@gmail.com. And here is a very spooky story. Thanks for watching.
So most snakes, if they appear in photos and videos. Not very often do they appear with our own two eyes. But only a handful of times, 3 times, has something appeared very distinctly. Not just shapes, not just shadows, not just whispers, something distinct was seen with our own 2 eyes. And out of these 3 instances, I was the first one, so... I had a group as we were coming out of the Wonderland door for the first time before we head into the cells. I stop and I count everybody off. And I see somebody go around that tunnel. People get curious, that's fine. But I can't separate the party, so I call out, "Don't worry, sir, we'll go there next." And then I did a head count. And nobody had gone around that tunnel. Now I fully admit that maybe this was a trick of the light and a trick of the shadow. There's a lot of bodies, there's a lot of light sources. I am happy to admit maybe this was an illusion. But it was so convincing, I addressed it out loud to an entire tour group. So I'm trying to shove this memory to the deep, dark recesses of my mind. And then some weeks later, I had a small group, and on the way back out, I had 2 gals go down that same tunnel to rejoin us in the poker room. And they come out and they're looking around. And I'm like, what? Well, they were wondering where the man was. He wasn't a part of our tour. What man? And they gave the same exact description I had. A tall, pale man wearing dark clothes, carrying a lantern going down that tunnel. Now, a tall, pale man wearing dark clothes in Portland, absolutely unheard of. However, the fact that it was that same exact description, doing that same exact thing a second time, was unsettling enough. Until just a couple of months ago, don't worry, we have story number 3. Where you're sitting in the poker room while I'm at the Pop Oregon, and a gal, and she was talking about this to her husband before she ever came to me, so I was hearing the whispers of her talking to her husband. And she said that standing in the corner, she saw a figure. Now he was kind of watching us the same way that she was watching him. Out of the corner of your eye, are you there? Am I seeing you? And she said that while he was there, the lights were flickering, the shadows were flickering unnaturally. And as soon as he was gone, all the shadows and all the light sources went back to normal. And it was the same description. As soon as I showed them that first photo, she went, it's him. Tall, pale figure wearing dark clothes in that same exact area a 3rd time. Now, I didn't know this at the time, and I'm walking around la-da-da-da-da. And she was saying to her husband, well, this feels foreboding. Not malicious, not evil, not mean, but what's going to happen next? And as we head down that next hallway where that first photo was taken, that doorway through Narnia, through the brick archway, was open. Now, I close that door a very specific way every time. There's a reason why I do it myself. And somehow, between tours, it has swung wide open. And this freaked me out because there should not be anybody down there. That door does not swing by itself. And she was saying to her husband, oh, that was it. That was the second thing. That was the foreboding thing that was going to happen. So, you know, the 3 times somebody sees something with their own 2 eyes, they are all relative and connected. And I hate that. Thank you.
Thank you.